To the widow who sought shelter on his ranch, the lonely virgin rancher said, "I've never had a woman." The ranch sat far away from the main road, surrounded by open land that seemed to stretch forever. Dry grass moved gently with the wind, and old wooden fences marked the borders of the property. The house was simple, built strong, but without decoration. It had been standing there for many years, just like the man who lived inside it. His life was quiet, steady, and mostly unseen by the world. The rancher woke up before sunrise every day. He did not need an alarm. His body was used to the routine. He would wash his face with cold water, pull on his worn boots, and step outside while the sky was still dark. The animals depended on him, and he never failed them. He fed the horses, checked the fences, and made sure everything was in order. This work gave his life structure. Without it, the silence would feel too heavy. He had lived alone for as long as he could remember. There was no family waiting inside the house, no voices, no laughter, just the sound of the wind, the animals, and his own footsteps. He did not complain about it. This was the life he knew. Talking to people had never come easy to him, and over time he stopped trying. The ranch became his whole world. In the evenings, after a long day of work, he would sit on the porch with a simple meal. The sun would slowly sink behind the land, painting the sky in soft colors. These moments were calm, but also lonely. He often wondered what life might have been like if things were different, but those thoughts never stayed long. He believed some things were simply not meant for him. On one particular day, the weather changed suddenly. Dark clouds gathered and the wind grew stronger. The rancher noticed it while fixing a fence and knew a storm was coming. He finished his work quickly and headed back to the house. Rain began to fall hard, turning the dirt paths into mud. Thunder rolled across the sky, loud and heavy. As he approached the house, something unusual caught his eye. Near the front gate, barely visible through the rain, stood a figure. At first, he thought it might be his imagination. No one ever came out here. But as he got closer, he saw clearly that it was a woman. She stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a small bag close to her chest. Her clothes were simple and worn. Her shoulders were tense, and her face showed exhaustion. She looked like someone who had been walking for a long time without knowing where she would end up. The rancher stopped, unsure of what to do. His heart beat faster. He had not spoken to a woman in years, maybe ever, in a meaningful way. His first thought was confusion, then concern. The storm was growing stronger, and it was not safe for anyone to stay outside. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice low and awkward. He asked if she needed help. The woman looked up surprised, as if she had not expected anyone to answer the door. For a moment she did not speak. Then, in a soft and tired voice, she asked if she could take shelter from the storm. He nodded quickly and opened the door wider, stepping aside to let her in. Words were difficult for him, but kindness was not. He did not ask many questions. He could see she needed rest more than explanations. Inside the house, the air was warm and dry. The woman hesitated at the entrance, unsure if she truly belonged there. The rancher pointed to a chair and brought her a towel. His movements were careful, almost nervous. He kept a respectful distance, afraid of doing something wrong. As she dried her hair, he prepared some tea. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the strange feeling of having someone else in his space. The house, which had always felt large and empty, suddenly felt different. Not crowded, but alive in a way it had never been before. They sat across from each other, the sound of rain filling the silence between them. The woman slowly explained that she was a widow. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes carried deep sadness. She spoke of losing her home and having nowhere else to go. She did not ask for much, only a place to stay until the storm passed. The rancher listened quietly. He was not good at offering comfort with words, but he felt her pain in his own way. He knew what it meant to lose something important, even if his loss had been different. Loneliness had been his companion for years. He told her she could stay for the night, maybe longer if needed. The words surprised even him. He was not used to inviting anyone into his life, even temporarily, but something about her presence felt right, like this moment was meant to happen. The widow thanked him, her voice full of relief. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to breathe easily. The storm outside continued, but inside the house, a quiet calm settled in. That night, the rancher prepared a simple bed for her in the spare room. He had rarely used it, mostly for storage. As he placed clean sheets on the bed, he felt a strange mix of responsibility and purpose. It had been a long time since someone depended on him in this way. When everything was ready, he showed her the room and quietly wished her good night. She thanked him again, her eyes gentle and tired. He nodded and returned to his own room, lying awake for hours. The sound of rain slowly faded. replaced by the steady rhythm of his thoughts. For the first time in years, he was aware of another presence in the house. It did not make him uncomfortable. Instead, it filled a space he had long ignored. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know how long she would stay, or how their lives might change. But as he finally drifted to sleep, one thing was clear. The quiet ranch was no longer just his alone. Morning came slowly to the ranch, carried in by soft light and the distant sound of animals. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the land fresh and quiet. The rancher woke earlier than usual, his mind alert in a way it had not been for years. For a brief moment, he forgot why. Then he remembered there was someone else in the house. He sat up, listening. The familiar silence was different now. It was not empty. It held meaning. He dressed quickly and stepped outside to begin his morning work, as he always did. The air was cool, and the ground still held the scent of rain. As he moved through the routine, feeding the animals and checking the gates, his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman resting under his roof. Inside the house, the widow woke later, unsure of where she was at first. The room was plain, but clean. Sunlight slipped through the small window and rested on the floor. For the first time in many days, she felt safe. The weight in her chest was still there, but it was lighter than before. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her bag close, gathering her courage. When she finally stepped out into the main room, she paused. Everything around her told the story of a man who lived simply. There were no decorations, only useful things. A table, a few chairs, shelves with tools and supplies. It felt honest, not cold. She heard movement outside and guessed the rancher was already at work. Not wanting to be a burden, she decided to help in whatever way she could. She found a kettle and carefully heated water, hoping she was not overstepping. When the rancher returned, surprised to find her awake and moving around, she offered him a cup of tea. He hesitated, then accepted it with a quiet nod. They sat at the table, unsure how to begin. Words felt fragile between them, as if too much speaking might break something. He asked if she had rested well. She said she had, and meant it. The simple exchange felt important, like the first stone laid on a long road. As the morning went on, she asked if there was anything she could do to help. He tried to say no, but she insisted gently. Finally, he showed her small tasks around the house. She swept the floor, washed dishes, and organized items that had been left untouched for years. None of it felt forced. It gave her a sense of purpose she had been missing. Outside, the rancher worked with the animals. From time to time, he glanced toward the house, noticing movement through the window. It made him feel both nervous and calm at the same time. He was not used to sharing his space, but he did not feel the need to push her away. When midday came, he offered to show her the land so she would not feel trapped indoors. They walked slowly across the fields. The widow listened as he explained the animals and the work he did. He spoke more than usual, his voice steady but careful. She listened closely, not just to his words, but to the effort behind them. She told him small things about herself, where she had come from, how life had changed after her loss. She did not go into details, but he understood enough. Pain did not need many words. As they walked, their steps began to fall into a shared rhythm. They stopped near a fence and looked out over the land. The widow said it was peaceful. He agreed, though he had never thought of it that way before. Hearing it from her made him see his home differently. That afternoon, silence returned, but it no longer felt uncomfortable. She rested while he worked. The house held warmth, not just from the sunlight, but from the quiet understanding growing between them. In the evening, she prepared a simple meal using what she could find. The rancher watched, unsure whether to stop her. When they sat down to eat together, it felt strange, but also right. He had eaten alone for so many years that sharing a table felt like a new experience. They spoke a little more freely as they ate. Nothing deep, just everyday thoughts. The weather, the animals, the long road leading away from the ranch. Each small conversation built trust, slowly and naturally. As night fell, the widow thanked him again for letting her stay. She told him she did not know what the future held, but she was grateful for the kindness he had shown. He nodded, his words caught somewhere inside him. Kindness was easier than speaking about feelings. Before going to bed, he stood on the porch for a long time looking at the stars. He realized that for the first time in many years he was not waiting for the day to end. He was curious about tomorrow. Inside, the widow lay awake as well. The ranch was quiet, but her thoughts were busy. She felt safe, but also unsure. She did not want to become attached to a place meant only as shelter. Still, something about the rancher's gentle presence made her feel less alone. Two lonely lives, under one roof, moved carefully through the day. There were no promises, no expectations, just shared space, shared silence, and the beginning of something neither had planned. And as the lights went out and the ranch settled into the night, both of them sensed that this was no longer just a temporary pause in their lives. It was the start of a slow, meaningful change, even if they did not yet know where it would lead. The days passed gently on the ranch, each one blending into the next, yet somehow feeling different from before. The widow stayed longer than either of them had first expected. There was no clear plan, no fixed end date. It simply happened. Each morning she woke up, helped where she could, and tried not to think too far ahead. Each evening, the rancher returned from his work tired but calm, finding quiet comfort in knowing he was not alone anymore. They had settled into a rhythm. It was not spoken about, but it was there. Mornings were quiet, filled with small sounds like boiling water and footsteps on the wooden floor. Afternoons were peaceful, with the widow reading or resting while the rancher worked outside. Evenings were slow, marked by simple meals and short conversations. One evening after dinner, the sky outside turned a deep shade of orange. The air was still, and the land seemed to be holding its breath. The rancher stepped outside to sit on the porch, as he often did. This time, the widow followed him. He hesitated at the door, then took a seat a little distance away. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun disappear behind the fields. Normally, silence was something the rancher understood well, but tonight it felt heavier, as if words were waiting to be spoken. The widow broke the quiet first. Her voice was soft, almost unsure. She said the ranch felt peaceful, but sometimes the quiet reminded her too much of what she had lost. The rancher turned his head slightly, listening closely. He did not interrupt. He had learned that some things needed space. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She talked about her life before, about shared routines, about how the world had suddenly changed. She did not speak with bitterness. There was sadness, but also acceptance. She admitted that she still felt confused about who she was now. The rancher kept his eyes on the land as she spoke, but his attention was fully on her. He did not know how to respond. Comforting words did not come easily to him. Still, he felt something opening inside his chest, something he had kept closed for a very long time. When she finished speaking, there was another pause. The air felt different, as if the truth she had shared had changed something between them. The widow took a deep breath and looked at him. She asked quietly if he had always lived alone. The question caught him off guard. He shifted in his seat, unsure whether to answer. No one had ever asked him that before, not truly. After a moment, he nodded. He said he had always lived this way. He explained that the ranch had been his whole life, and that he had never been good with people. She did not judge him. Instead, she asked gently if he ever felt lonely. He thought about it. For years, he had not allowed himself to think about loneliness. It was easier to accept silence than to name the ache behind it. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low and steady, but honest. He said that loneliness had become normal for him. He did not know anything else. Then, after another long pause, he shared something he had never said out loud before. He told her that he had never had a woman in his life. Not companionship, not closeness, not shared warmth. His words were simple, without drama. It was not a confession filled with shame, but a truth shaped by years of quiet living. The widow listened carefully. She did not look surprised. Instead, she looked thoughtful. She could see that his words carried weight, not because of what they described, but because of how long he had carried them alone. She told him there was no fault in that. Life, she said, did not follow the same path for everyone. Some people found connection early, some late, and some in ways they never expected. Her words were kind, not pitying. The rancher felt something ease inside him. He had expected silence or discomfort, but instead found understanding. It made him feel seen in a way he never had before. They continued talking, slowly and carefully. The widow spoke about guilt, about how strange it felt to find comfort again after loss. I would be so happy, she admitted, that sometimes she felt afraid of feeling anything at all, worried it might mean forgetting what she had once had. The rancher listened, nodding slightly. He did not fully understand her experience, but he understood pain. He understood what it meant to live with something missing. He told her that the ranch had taught him patience, that animals did not rush healing, and neither should people. The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. He was not used to offering advice, yet it felt right. The light faded completely, and the stars began to appear. Neither of them noticed how much time had passed. The porch, once just a place to rest, had become a space for truth. Later that night they went inside. The house felt warmer than usual, not because anything had changed physically, but because something unspoken now lived within its walls. The next day, their interactions were quieter, but deeper. They did not talk about the conversation directly, but it shaped everything. There was more ease in their movements, more comfort in shared space, while working together on small tasks. The rancher found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The sound of her footsteps. The way she focused on simple work. None of it felt distracting. It felt grounding. The widow, in turn, noticed how careful he was, how he never crossed boundaries, how he gave her space without distance. She realized how rare that kind of respect was. That afternoon, as they worked near the barn, the widow paused and looked around. She said that being there made her feel like she could breathe again. The rancher nodded. He told her that the ranch had saved him many times without him realizing it. As evening approached, they shared another meal. This time, there was less awkwardness. Conversation flowed naturally, touching on small memories and quiet hopes. Nothing was rushed. Nothing needed to be defined. Later, as the widow prepared to sleep, she thought about the rancher's confession. She did not see weakness in it. She saw honesty. And honesty, she realized, was the strongest foundation of all. In his own room, the rancher lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His heart felt steady, but full. Sharing his truth had not made him feel exposed. It had made him feel lighter. Two people, shaped by different losses, had crossed the line that day. Not a line of expectation or promise, but a line of understanding. They had spoken the truths they had carried alone. And in doing so, they had taken another step forward, not toward something loud or sudden, but toward healing that moved at its own quiet pace. The change did not happen suddenly. It arrived slowly, in small moments that were easy to miss if someone was not paying attention. After the night they had shared their truths on the porch, life on the ranch continued much the same on the surface. The animals still needed care, the land still demanded work, and the days still followed the sun. But underneath that familiar routine, something gentle was growing. The widow woke each morning with mixed feelings. Part of her felt calm, thankful for the shelter and kindness she had found. Another part felt uneasy, as if she were standing on soft ground that could shift at any moment. She reminded herself often that this place was not meant to be permanent. She did not want to depend too much on a kindness that had never been promised to last. The rancher, on the other hand, felt a quiet sense of responsibility. He did not speak of it, but he felt it deeply. He wanted the ranch to remain a place where she felt safe, not pressured or confused. He was careful with his words, careful with his actions. He feared that one wrong move could disturb the fragile peace they had built. They spent more time working together now. Not because it was necessary, but because it felt natural. They fixed small things around the house, cleaned the barn, and walked the fence line together. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Either way felt comfortable. One afternoon, as they worked near the old shed, the widow stopped and rested her hands on a wooden beam. She looked tired. The rancher noticed and asked if she needed to rest. She smiled softly and said she was fine, but he could see the heaviness behind her eyes. Later that day, she admitted that some days were harder than others. Grief, she said, did not follow a straight line. Some mornings she felt strong, ready to face the world again. Other mornings the past felt close enough to touch. She worried that staying on the ranch was making her forget who she used to be. The rancher listened carefully. He did not rush to reassure her. Instead, he said something simple. He told her that healing did not mean forgetting. It meant learning how to carry memories without letting them break you. He said the land had taught him that seasons change, but roots remain. His words stayed with her. That night, she lay awake thinking about them. She realized she had been fighting her own healing, afraid that moving forward would erase what she had lost. Slowly, she began to understand that peace and memory could exist together. At the same time, the rancher faced his own struggle. Feelings he had never known before were becoming harder to ignore. He felt drawn to her presence, not in a demanding way, but in a quiet, steady way that surprised him. He did not know what to do with these feelings. He had no experience to guide him, no past to learn from. He worried about crossing a line. He worried about misunderstanding kindness for something more. Most of all, he worried about hurting her, even unintentionally. So he chose patience. He reminded himself that being there for someone did not mean asking for anything in return. The widow noticed this restraint. She noticed how he always waited for her to speak first about personal matters, how he never assumed her feelings. It made her feel respected, not trapped. In many ways, his distance felt safer than closeness she had known before. One evening, a letter arrived with the mail delivery. It was addressed to the widow. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. It was from a distant relative, offering a possible place to stay in another town. The words were kind, but the thought of leaving filled her with uncertainty. She did not mention the letter right away. She carried it with her for the rest of the day, folded carefully in her pocket. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest. Leaving the ranch felt like stepping back into the unknown. Staying felt like delaying something she knew she would eventually have to face. That night, she finally spoke about it. They were sitting at the table after dinner, the house quiet around them. She told him about the letter and what it meant. Her voice was steady, but her eyes searched his face for something she could not name. The rancher felt a tightening in his chest, but he did not let it show. He told her that she should do what felt right for her. He said she deserved stability and a future that made sense to her. His words were honest, but saying them took effort. She nodded, grateful but conflicted. She admitted that part of her wanted to stay, not just because the ranch was safe, but because she felt understood there. Saying it out loud made her cheeks warm. She looked down, unsure if she had said too much. The rancher said nothing for a long moment. Then he told her that having her there had changed his life in ways he was still discovering. He did not speak of hope or plans. He simply spoke of gratitude. That was all he knew how to offer. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Not unpleasant, but thoughtful. The widow weighed her choices carefully. She imagined starting over somewhere new, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. She also imagined leaving the ranch and the man who had become an important part of her healing. Rancher, meanwhile, focused on his work. He found comfort in physical tasks, using them to calm his thoughts. Yet even as he worked, his mind returned to the idea of the ranch being empty again. The thought did not scare him, but it saddened him. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, the widow stopped and looked at him. She said she was afraid. Afraid of choosing wrong, afraid of hurting someone, afraid of hurting herself. Her honesty was quiet but powerful. The rancher put down his tools and faced her fully. He told her that fear was not a sign of weakness. It meant she cared. He said that whatever choice she made, she did not owe anyone guilt. Life, he said, was not about perfect decisions, but honest ones. Tears filled her eyes, though she did not cry. She felt lighter hearing those words. For the first time since receiving the letter, she felt allowed to choose for herself. As the sun lowered, they stood there together, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. There was no promise spoken, no future decided, but there was understanding deep and steady. That night, as they went to their separate rooms, both felt the same truth settle quietly inside them. Whatever happened next, this time on the ranch had already changed them. It had taught them patience, respect, and the courage to face what came next. Healing, they were learning, was not about holding on or letting go too quickly. It was about standing still long enough to listen to what the heart was truly asking for. Morning arrived softly, as if the land itself wanted to give them time. The widow woke early, not from habit, but from a feeling that something inside her had settled. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the small room that had sheltered her through confusion and healing. It no longer felt like a temporary stop. It felt like a place where an important part of her life had unfolded. She folded her blanket carefully and opened her bag. Inside was the letter she had read so many times. The words had not changed, but her understanding of them had. The offer was kind, but it was not a solution to everything. She realized that wherever she went, she would carry her memories, her loss, and her strength with her. No place could take that away or replace it. Outside, the rancher was already awake, moving through his morning tasks. The land looked familiar, yet different, as if he were seeing it with new eyes. He felt calm, but also alert, aware that the day mattered. He did not know what choice the widow would make, and he did not try to guess. He had learned that waiting, when done with respect, was not weakness. When the widow stepped outside, he noticed immediately. She walked slowly toward him, the early light resting on her shoulders. He greeted her as he always did, with a quiet nod and a gentle tone. She smiled, and that small expression carried more meaning than many words. They worked side by side for a while, feeding the animals and checking the fences. Neither spoke about the letter. There was no rush. The rhythm of shared work had become a language of its own. Each step, each movement felt like part of a larger understanding. Later, as the sun rose higher, they sat on the porch together. The widow took a deep breath. She told him she had thought long and carefully about her next step. She spoke clearly, not to convince him, but to honor herself. She said she would not leave right away. Not because she was afraid of the world beyond the ranch, but because she had found something important here. She needed time to build her strength fully before moving forward. She wanted to choose her future, not escape into it. The rancher listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded slowly. He told her she was welcome to stay as long as she needed. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed relief. Not relief because she stayed, but relief because she had chosen honestly. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch settled into a deeper sense of peace. The widow began to feel more confident in herself. She laughed more easily. She planned small things for the future, like learning new skills and finding work when the time felt right. Aries, so no longer hiding from life. She was preparing for it. The rancher changed too. He spoke more, not just with her, but with others when necessary. He found that having someone to share the quiet with had given him courage. He no longer saw his past as something missing, but as a path that had led him exactly where he needed to be. One afternoon they sat near the fence line, watching the animals move across the field. The widow spoke about hope, about how it no longer frightened her. She said hope did not mean forgetting the past. It meant allowing the future to exist. The rancher nodded. He told her that before she arrived, he had believed his life would always remain unchanged. He had accepted that idea without sadness. But now, he understood that change did not have to arrive loudly to be meaningful. There was no sudden promise made between them, no dramatic moment. Instead, there was something quieter and stronger. Mutual respect, shared trust, the knowledge that whatever came next would be faced with honesty. As time passed, the widow began preparing for the next chapter of her life. She made plans, wrote letters, and saved what little money she could. The rancher helped her without question, offering support without trying to shape her choices. When the day finally came for her to leave, it did not feel like loss. It felt like completion. They stood near the gate where she had first arrived, tired and uncertain. Now she stood straight, calm, and ready. She thanked him, not just for shelter, but for patience and understanding. He thanked her in return for reminding him that life could still surprise him. They did not speak of what they had been to each other. They did not need to. What mattered was what they had given one another: space to heal, time to grow, and the courage to move forward. As she walked down the road, she did not look back with sadness. She looked ahead with quiet confidence. The rancher watched until she disappeared from sight, then returned to his work. The land felt peaceful, not empty. In the days that followed, the ranch returned to its familiar rhythm, but it was not the same as before. The silence was no longer heavy. It was full, shaped by memory and meaning. Both of them carried the experience with them, not as a story of rescue or dependence, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important changes happen when two lonely paths cross briefly, leaving both stronger than before. And in that truth, they found something lasting, not a promise of forever, but the knowledge that real connection, even when temporary, can leave a permanent mark on the heart.